Okay, hello here. It is Shane, and I'm doing an important lecture here with the 3-3 invasion to the 4-4 point. Now, this is part of my Essential Joseki series, and this is the third episode of that. And even though this is kind of one of the more common moves that we see now in Go, especially after the advent of artificial intelligence and AlphaGo, the first thing we're going to do today is cover the old variation, the traditional variation of the 3-3 invasion before artificial intelligence, and then we're going to talk about the other ways that are now being commonly seen in professional games, high-level games, artificial intelligence games, and amateur games. So first, let's just look at the regular old Joseki that was the dominant way that this pattern was played before, say, 2000. Now, after the c3 invasion at the 3-3 point, black is going to block to one side or the other, and white will extend, and black will hane. And I should say here that we only make this hane when there's not a stone around f3 or f4. If the bottom side is empty, then black can play hane at the head of two stones. White will hane. Now, black has some extra options, but we're just going to go with the standard variation of getting a wall and getting territory. Now, after white crawls twice on the second line, white says crawling on the second line is not that beneficial because black gets a bigger and bigger wall and white is only making 1 point at a time. So once white has enough room to make life, white stops crawling on the second line and hanes. White plays hane and connection because it creates a cutting point here at the e3 area, and black will have to defend that cutting point. And this is the end of the pattern. So I'm sure most players, even beginners, are familiar with this, and it is a classic division of influence. Black has this external wall that will be influencing the rest of the game. It can play into the center, it can play into the bottom side, it even can play into the upper left area. And white has roughly 8 to 10 points of territory in the corner. So white also has the sente, and this is what's important to note, is that black played in the corner first at 4-4, white invaded at the 3-3, and the sequence ends where white is now free to play anywhere else on the board. So the important thing about this is white doesn't get that much locally here because it's just a few points. And those stones in the corner are not going to influence any future fights or development of territory in other areas of the board. Whereas black's stones are very active, will influence future fights and be able to develop territory in other parts of the board. But white has sente. And that's the key part of this whole Joseki, is who ends sente. And the reason beginners need to pay attention to this is anytime you engage in a corner Joseki pattern or some sort of corner sequence, you should think about who is ending the sequence with the initiative. So let's talk about this old school variation for just a minute more and when we normally see it. Before artificial intelligence, when we saw this double wing formation out from a 4-4 stone from the Q16, this is when we would want to invade at the point that I've marked C. Because if we invade at A or B, the standard approach, we will get kicked. And then our group will become cramped. And that's what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to avoid having a small cramped group that becomes a target for our opponent. The same thing happens if we approach over at A. However, if we invade at C and we play the old school variation that I've showed, black has now invaded the corner and lived without any complications. Now black can look to play at any of the triangled points. Some of these kind of high, large knights move cap that I've marked here at N11 to neutralize, or some sort of capping over the K17 stone, or depending on what we have in the lower right corner in the game, something around R8, or if we already have a stone at R8, it's even better. We can look to kind of reduce from the kind of R10, S10 area. We can look to play really light in the center to reduce the framework there, or we can look to cap. This all depends on the global circumstance. But we can see that living in the corner without any complications and then looking to reduce the outside. Now, this is the only time in which the 20th century professional players liked a direct invasion at 3-3. Now, let's rewind some and go to the modern way. Now, this is where I think most players who are in the double digit and single digit queue are going to benefit the most from this lecture, is understanding how an outright invasion here works now. We don't like to play the standard pattern when either player doesn't really like the standard pattern when the board is fairly empty. So, A leads to some of the more standard patterns, and we're going to try to avoid that. Now, we did see moves like B and C all throughout the 20th century, but now they're becoming really popular in the 21st century. The idea behind black playing both B and C is that black is looking to keep the initiative. So if we compare to the lower left corner, black lost the initiative in that he got a great wall, but white lived in the corner, and it ends the sequence with it being white's move. So with black playing at B or C, black is trying to make a situation where his stones are strong enough that he can leave them. So let's just first, we're going to skip A because that leads to some of the variations in the lower left. We're going to play B. Now, it's natural for white, if you see your opponent give an extra extension here instead of the traditional hane at the head of two stones, you could think about continuing to push along at A, or if you want to kind of slide out to B and build some more territory and get ahead in the pushing race, because white is pushing from behind. So sometimes we try not to push from behind, but here it's perfectly fine to push from behind. So now black hanes, and the key move here is that black does not continue, because if you continue from this point, it will lead to a sequence that is similar to the lower left. So we're trying to end the sequence sente, meaning ending an initiative. And so black says, okay, I got 3 stones on the outside, I've pushed white down, I can play elsewhere. I can leave a weakness and take initiative to play elsewhere. So let's just put a move down at D16. This could be anywhere else on the board that black needs the initiative, but here I'm just putting a stone there to show local continuations. So what is black giving up when he doesn't play in the upper right corner? Well, he's risking white getting not enclosed by playing a move like B, or he's even risked getting cut at C, or he's risked losing kind of the influential sphere if white is able to play an extension or some invasion around A. So I've left the lower left corner here as a reference diagram. The lower left here will serve as our reference. So if white is allowed to play here at B, okay, black is not going to allow a capture of a single stone. That would be really too generous. So black connects. We can already see that the wall for black here is 4 stones tall, whereas here in the lower left we have kind of a 5 stone wall, 6 stone wall, and white is out. White is continuing along the side. So that is already better for white and worse for black. Furthermore, black doesn't really have his eye shape and resiliency that he has in the lower left. But remember, playing elsewhere on the board is totally worth these sacrifices in the shape. Okay, so white can make the most of it by playing here. It seems a little funny to just kind of extend down. However, let's say white were to invade. Once black gets this Hane here at R18 and white answers, black is kind of able to cut here, which is dissatisfactory because white can't just simply capture the stone, because he'll be captured. So, if white protects this area, then black can go ahead and capture that stone if he has the ladder. Or if white goes to capture this stone, black can play here first and then here and capture this. So we can see that getting Haned at R18 is a common theme in some of these variations that I'm going to show. So if white wants to avoid that, white can play here. Now black very well could just extend somewhere, maybe here, and say, okay, that's good enough for me. I have a thick wall that's pointing kind of towards this central area. It has a base and an extension. Yes, black is not going to make a lot of territory on the top side with that group, but white only has about 12 points in the corner, maximum, and black's allowed to play elsewhere on the board during this whole sequence now. Black has 2 moves ahead. Black can also just completely ignore this and say it's really hard to kill those 5 stones, so black could just play somewhere else again. Because no matter what white does, if white tries to, say, attack black, it's very hard. Because black can simply run out, black can try to counterpincer, black still has resources to push along this way, black can run away in a number of ways. It's really hard to surround that group. So black can use it as another place to tanuki, meaning play elsewhere. So, for a single digit or double digit cue, I'm going to leave it there. If you're white and you play at B, you're going to make black just kind of a semi-useful, semi-useless wall by playing at B and then descending down. And white will have a good amount of territory, but black will use this as maybe a kind of a useful group. It's undetermined if that group's going to be useful or it's going to be a burden on black. So that's one way that this sequence can happen. Similarly, white can play at A and look to take the extension away immediately, and black, of course, will now take the other side's vital point. And then white will peep here. So black will connect this peep, generally. And now white has a number of options. White could say, it depends on the whole board situation, could defend this peeping stone, could defend this stone. And the logic behind this is white's lived in the corner, and he's given black, again, this is kind of an unclear position. It depends on the whole board circumstance. Black has these 7 stones in the middle of the board. Are they influential in a wall? Kind of. But they're also kind of a clump of stones without eyes. But it's also really hard to surround because this group already has 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 liberties. So it's really hard to kill this group. And it's also not that immediately useful, but it can be useful. And it's not like white is able to make some big framework position. White has a little corner and a little topside position. So again, these are all going to be very circumstantial to what else has happened. And so the reason that artificial intelligence likes this type of position, and the reason that professionals like this type of position in modern play, is that there's multiple follow-ups, and both players kind of wait and see when's the right time to choose the right path. And furthermore, black wants to avoid losing Sente, but white also wants to avoid just getting closed in the corner as in the old school variation. Okay, lastly, I'm going to show what happens if white cuts at C. Now this is the most severe variation, but it also leads to the most complicated positions for both players. So black's not going to give up a stone, and white cannot allow black to turn at S13 because that would put the corner in jeopardy, and then the outside stone would almost surely die. So now we have a fight. So let's try to understand this fight. Okay, from this point we see black is divided into two groups. White has the corner group, which is very safe, but white has these two outside stones which don't have any help locally. Black has groups of 3 on each side, so it's a little harder to kill black, but black needs to help the top side stones because they're lacking a base. Now, black plays this move, the tiger's mouth, the hanging connection, because a solid connection move doesn't help make eye shape in any way. So he plays hanging connection. Now when white plays this, it would be a big mistake to connect because if you wanted to play solid connection, you should have played it immediately. The thinking here by black is later, if black wants to play a ko, it can help with eye shape, and if black wins the ko, it can endanger white's whole corner. But black is not going to immediately engage in the ko because he has other things to deal with in the fight. So black jumps normally to protect these 3 stones, and you would see white run out in some fashion. Let's just pick a simple move. Now say black can also run out. We could pick a simple move, or we could think of other ways depending on the global situation. But let's just play this. Now, what this does is it keeps in reserve the option of playing the ko at A. Because presumably, everyone's going to be a little busy for a while to worry about the corner moves. Black has to be careful not to play too far out. If black plays something too far out, not only can he be split and in danger, but then capturing here, black will not ever have the opportunity to play the ko and can be further threatened with the cut. So black has to choose a move that defends. If white jumps out, black has to choose a move that defends those upper side group and preserves the opportunity for a ko. So the option at C is the most complicated option. So just to recap, B is white's move to make black kind of a semi-useless wall and get out. A would be to develop or invade the top side and make black a slightly larger target that you're going to put a little bit of pressure on. And C is normally what white would choose if white has a lot of outside help either on the top or the right side to make that attack really work. Now, if white does not get the sente to play here again, black can follow up by first playing hane here and then playing double hane here. And in this way, white will often live in the corner in such a way that it kind of resembles what's happened in the lower left. But again, white will get sente. So this type of outcome looks a lot like what happened in the lower left. And again, white has the sente, so it is very similar to the lower left. Or white can play here directly and then it can leave some sort of extra options. Or if black plays here, white's already alive in the corner without defending the S15. So white can play elsewhere again. So there's a few ways that black can try to close white in. Now, you'll not normally see this, but sometimes you'll see something like this if white needs to develop the side. So if this happens, white's trying to prevent himself from being closed in, but black can take the corner back for himself. So if black gets another move, he can produce results that are similar to the lower left, or even better than that, by closing white in more fully. So there's quite a few options there. Now that was all trying to just cover this simple extension at B. The moves here at C often provide very similar, if not identical, situation. If white pushes, well, we're in the very same position we were already in. So it transposes. The only difference here is if you play the attachment. Now it can transpose in this way back to our situation in the lower left. Or if you play attachment and there's a block, it can play like some of our other variations. So frequently, it leaves like this. Now, if we don't want to transpose back into the other variations, black will simply play elsewhere at this point in the game. So at this point in the game, black will play elsewhere. And then white can take advantage in similar ways, leading to quite identical types of scenarios. And everyone can kind of improvise their own way around this. I'm not going to cover all the exhaustive variations because I think we've covered the main concepts of the purpose that the way that black and white try to keep the initiative and what types of follow-ups when we come back to the situation. So I know this is a really in-depth topic. Artificial intelligence is coming up with new variations for this 3-3 invasion all the time. Many players are experimenting with different ways of playing this, so we're going to see new variations crop up, but it's good to know the basic concepts. So I hope this kind of gets you started to think about different ways of playing the 3-3 invasion in a more or less empty board than we had previously understood before 21st Century Go. All right, thank you.